Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Terry Richardson. I'm an ecologist here at UNA in the Department of Biology. And I would like to welcome you all here to this information session on behalf of our President, President Kenneth Kitts, and our Vice President, Dr. Ross Alexander. It is largely up to them that this was made possible tonight. I'd like to especially welcome and thank Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for setting this up. I think we all recognize that this is a very important issue. I think the state of Alabama has been quite fortunate to keep the tide of this stemmed as long as we have, but it's time now that we start combating this, I think, with education, and it starts at a place like this. Very good place. Welcome to you all to be here. Before I turn this over to Amy for the information part of the session, I'd just like to point out that Deputy Commissioner Ed Poulos, he and I go back a few years, and he gave me a call Monday and said he needed a favor. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "Well, I need a venue." I'm like, "Well, we have a venue. We've got everything from Norton Auditorium all the way down to small classrooms." And I said, "Well, this is not going to be a problem." I'm thinking, okay, end of this month or maybe next month, February or something like that. And I said, "Well, when do you need this?" And at that time, he had Amy and me on speakerphone, and she says, "Thursday night." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll see if we can make that happen." So because of the efforts of President Kitts and Vice President Ross Alexander, was able to make this happen. So welcome to you all. We are glad that you are here, and we're very happy that UNA was able to host this information session for you. So with that, I will turn it over to Amy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richardson. We do greatly appreciate UNA for having us here tonight. All right, we ready to get started? I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Amy Silvano. I'm the Assistant Chief of Wildlife for the Division of Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And on behalf of our agency, we would like to welcome you to this information session tonight. I'd also like to thank Raymond Jones Jr. He's up in the front here. He's one of our Conservation Advisory Board members who are here tonight. He's out of Huntsville. He's here representing District 5. So thank you for coming, Raymond. Okay, so for anybody, if you didn't know why we're here, this is not the Ringling Brothers circus event. Sorry, I hate to break it to you. However, given the events of tonight, it may or may not be just as entertaining. So hopefully we can get this through pretty quickly, Again, thank you, UNA. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms, this is a large auditorium, and it's my first time here. Over to the left, out the exit door, we have the ladies' room. Over to the right, we have the men's room. I also want to point out that this session is being recorded, so try and be pleasant, keep your voices down as much as we can, be respectful of all the panelists and everybody in the room. I'd like to go over how we're going to work this evening. We're going to ask that you hold all of your questions until the end. We're going to have a facilitated question and answer. As you came in, everybody got an index card and a pen that you can write them down, write your questions down. We have staff going around the facility at any point during the presentations. If you have a question, we can get you, raise your hand. One of our staff members in the green or in the LE uniform will come over. They'll get you an index card. You can write your question down, hand it off. We have a few of our staff members off to the side compiling them, grouping them, eliminating duplicate questions. And once we get through our presentations, we will start reading those individual questions to our panel members. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Keith Galden. He's the Chief of Wildlife. He's going to give you an overview of what we're going to do tonight.
Good evening. What a great turnout. A lot of people, good interest. So why are we here? We're here to talk about chronic wasting disease, commonly known as CWD. It's a contagious and fatal neurological disease that affects members of the Cervidae family. In Alabama, that's our white-tailed deer. And as you all know, I would think that you're aware of our chronic wasting disease positive detection that we had in west central Lauderdale County. It was a hunter-harvested deer not too long ago. And in light of this, we arranged this meeting at short time to provide you all public information about CWD, about our efforts of surveillance, about our efforts in response to that detection, and how hunters and the public can help us and assist us in determining if we have more or if we have less, and how we can respond appropriately to this disease detection. So tonight, we will have an overview about the chronic wasting disease detection that we had in Lauderdale County. We'll have a program that provides a lot of background information on chronic wasting disease. We'll provide a summary about our sampling history, our past sampling history, present, and what we're looking to do in the future. A summary about our response to this positive detection that we have, and talk about hunter assistance that's been provided in the past. We've really been fortunate to keep CWD out of Alabama for this time, and I attribute that to hunters' participation and adherence to our regulations, our Carcass import regulation. So we're really appreciative of that, and appreciative of our hunters that have provided samples for us for our chronic disease sampling efforts. And after that information is presented, the program will be followed up with a facilitated public question and answer session. We'll have a really well-rounded panel of experts in their field to answer questions that you all have been writing down on those index cards. So a timeline of what we have seen so far about the detection in Lauderdale County. We received the the non-negative sample on December 23rd this year from a free-range hunter-harvested white-tailed deer. The sample was overnighted to NVSL, which is the National Veterinarian Science Lab in Ames, Iowa, ran by the United States Department of Agriculture. They received that on Christmas Eve. The sample was confirmed positive on the 6th of January. We revised and implemented a new regulation which was effective the 7th of January, and public information was released about that positive detection in Lauderdale County on the 7th of January. And this is the map that we have now representing the high-risk zone, the HRZ, the buffer zone, the BZ, and that compiles what we call the chronic waste disease management zone. So you have that area that's west of US 43 to the Tennessee line and the Mississippi line to the west and south to the river, and then east of 43 and south of the river in Colbert County, and that eastern portion of Lauderdale County represents the buffer zone that we have. So we have a couple of speakers of our own staff that will provide some information about chronic wasting disease. Chris Cook, he's our white-tailed deer program coordinator for our division. He'll be providing a CWD overview and a little bit about our surveillance and response efforts. And we'll have Captain Michael East in our law enforcement section, and he'll cover the CWD new regulation review and some other information regarding that. So I'll leave it to Chris Cook.
Thank you. I think probably, if not before, at least since last week, a lot of you have done some research on chronic wasting disease, so you may have a understanding of what it is, but we're going to briefly run over what we know about it. It's a contagious, fatal, neurodegenerative disease of members of the deer family. All of the deer found in North America are susceptible to it. The disease is always progressive. It's always fatal, and right now there's no vaccine or cure for it. It's in the same group of diseases as scrapie, which affects goats and sheep, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow disease, which affects cattle, and then Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a human variation of a TSC. What causes this disease is one of the things that makes it so unique. It's caused by abnormal enzyme-resistant forms of proteins called prions, which are normally formed in the central nervous system and the lymphoid tissues. Something causes these normal prions or proteins to misfold, and they become very resistant to to most anything that tries to break them down, including enzymes, chemicals, heat, disinfectants, and time. They can persist in an environment indefinitely. The most infections probably occur from deer-to-deer contact, but there's also potential infection through ingestion of the prions, and indirectly through ingesting the prions that are found in the environment where they may accumulate over time. Prions are found in saliva, feces, urine, blood, and even decaying carcasses. Prions, once the deer is infected, they begin shedding these prions into the environment within 6 months of getting exposed to it or getting CWD. It's most common in adults because it is a kind of a progressive disease, but it also has been detected in yearlings, and I think at least one fawn in Texas, I think was 5 months old. That's the youngest one I know of. Has a long incubation period, so a deer can get the disease basically, and really not have any outward or obvious effects from it for a pretty good long time, 12 to 60 plus months. Typically, a deer that has CWD looks fairly normal, and the only way you know it's sick is it was tested. CWD was first described as an ailment of deer in a captive facility in Colorado back in the 60s. Since that time, it's spread over most of the U.S. Alabama became the 28th state to have found CWD either in wild or captive deer. 4 Canadian provinces have also found it in deer, wild or captive. And then it's also been found in 4 foreign countries, South Korea, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. So it's not just a thing limited to Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama. It's in over half the states now. And like I said on the previous slide, what does a deer with CWD look like? The overwhelming majority of the ones that have tested positive all over the country have looked like this, look normal. Most of them are hunter-harvested deer. That's where we get the overwhelming majority of our samples for our surveillance program is through hunter-harvested deer. But what happens as the disease progresses? Deer start showing symptoms such as loss of body condition. They start getting poor, losing weight, eventually becoming very emaciated as the disease reaches its final stages. They show abnormal behavior because it is a disease that's affecting their central nervous system. So just aren't acting right. They have a depressed or drooping posture. You know how most any sick animal has that kind of same posture. Obviously they're not feeling well. They start losing coordination, trouble standing, trouble walking. They have a lot of times will have what's called an A-frame stance, where the front feet are spread further apart just so they can maintain their balance. Often we'll have excessive urination and excessive drinking, and also excessive salivation. But these are also symptoms of other ailments of white-tailed deer. So just because you see a deer doing one or several of these doesn't necessarily mean it has CWD. If you're in an area where CWD is known to occur and you see an animal that's acting or showing some of these symptoms, then you just probably have a lot better chances of it actually being a CWD positive deer. So why are we concerned about this disease? Our department or our division is charged, or our mission statement is to manage, protect, conserve, and enhance the wildlife and aquatic resources of Alabama for the sustainable benefit of the people of Alabama. So we're charged with managing and making sure these resources that we all enjoy and all value are around and healthy for future generations. CWD has the potential to affect deer populations over the long term. It affects the dynamics of the population, and it affects how you manage that population. Most, if not all of us that are in here are deer hunters. Managing CWD and how things can change over time with trying to manage it has potential to affect and impact our hunting heritage, which is long and dear to a lot of us. It's a long-term disease. It's not. Think back to when I was talking about how the disease acts or how it progresses. It's not something that pops up and spreads like wildfire. It's a long, drawn-out process to try to manage and hopefully contain or slow the spread of it into new areas. And probably the one concern that we get more answers or questions about is the potential for human illness resulting from being exposed to deer with CWD or consuming deer with CWD. And so we'll address that one right now. We can address the other stuff at the question session. But to date, there has been no connection between human illness and CWD. Current research shows that there's a pretty strong species barrier for these TSE diseases, meaning they're not typically going to cross from deer to cows or cows to pigs and vice versa. In areas where CWD is known to occur, which as of now, this portion of Lauderdale County, we have found a CWD positive deer. The Centers for Disease Control recommends that anyone hunting in those areas strongly consider having deer that they harvest tested for CWD before consuming it. And if it comes back as CWD positive, to consider not eating or to not eat the meat. That's what they're recommending. We're using their recommendations because we're not a food safety agency, we're not a human health agency, so we rely on those experts in those fields to provide guidance. You can get more information from their website on this part of this aspect of CWD as well as what it is. You go into the website that's listed there. As I mentioned, we've been doing surveillance for CWD. Us and most every other state in the eastern U.S. really didn't do much CWD surveillance until Wisconsin detected it in the early 2000s. Since that time, we've sampled nearly 13,000 free-range deer. Again, most of the, probably 95% of those have been hunter-harvested deer. We also test roadkill deer that people find sick or dead for no apparent reason. But the overwhelming majority of the deer that we use in our surveillance program, and most states using their surveillance program, are hunter-harvested deer. That's why hunters are so important with us with trying to manage and find out more about this disease. Following the detection of CWD in Mississippi and Tennessee in 2018, we ramped up our sampling efforts all across the state. And for this year, as of today, I checked them about noon, we're up to about a little over 2,000 deer tested or sampled. Most of those have been tested. Some of them are at the lab waiting to be tested as we speak, but the overwhelming majority of them have been tested. And we've had that one detection. This map shows you that those 4 northwestern counties, Lauderdale, Colbert, Franklin, and Lamar County, or Marion County, they have some of the highest samples. Probably, I guess all 4 of them are the highest sampled counties in the state, and the reason being that of their proximity to those positives in Tennessee and Mississippi. So we have been sampling more in these counties over the last 4 years, and starting last year, we've been working with researchers at Cornell University to help tweak our CWD surveillance program and our risk assessment to determine how we do our surveillance. And following their recommendations, the sampling quotas for all counties that border all the adjacent states actually was increased quite a bit last year. Here's what we've collected in Lauderdale and Colbert counties in the last 3 years. We've collected about 250 samples here in Lauderdale County. Most of those have came in what is now considered a high-risk zone. We've collected right at 100 so far this season, and we're going to collect more till the end of season. Colbert County, again, it's got the most samples collected over the last 3-year period. A little over 300 deer have been sampled in Colbert County. So how can hunters help us? Again, we're relying on you guys to help us get those samples, to help us determine where the disease is at, the distribution of it, and the prevalence of the percentage of deer that have it in that area. The simplest way for you guys to have deer tested is, and since it's mandatory in the HRZ, we've increased the number of these freezers out there, but the simplest way to get it tested is to drop it off at one of our self-service drop-off locations. You just bring the head from your deer to the location, to the freezer, fill out a sample tag with your contact information, where you killed it, put it in the garbage bag, zip tie that tag to the bag, and drop it in the freezer, and our staff will come by and pick it up, and we'll pull the sample and have it tested. Right now we have, I guess, six freezer locations in the CWD Management Zone. We're working to get more of them out. Right here in Florence, we have one at Florence Frozen Meats and also at the Alabama Forestry Commission office. We have one up the road a little bit at Cypress Creek Indoor Range. We have a freezer there. It was just put out yesterday or day before yesterday. So we're working to get more freezer locations out, particularly kind of in the west central and northern part of the county. We will have one at Lauderdale WMA shortly, and so that'll be convenient for folks in that part of the county. We also have three right now in the northern part of Colbert County. We're working to add more to the other parts of the county too, for those folks that want to get their deer tested. Also looking to add something over in the eastern part of Lauderdale County. You can find all that information on our website. We have all of our CWD related info there at outdooralabama.com/CWD-info. Under that, you can see where CWD sampling is one of the buttons, and it'll take you to how to get your deer tested, including a list of all the drop-off freezers. We test deer, look for deer to test throughout the year. The bulk of them come during hunting season, but we also are testing deer that we find, like I mentioned earlier, roadkill deer, deer that have died from no apparent reason, or deer that are suspect. They're showing symptoms of those that we listed that could be from CWD or could be from anything else. So we're looking for those reports of those deer so we can get our hands on those samples and have those tested. You can report those sick deer through our website. Again, it's www.outdooralabama.com/report-sick-deer. You can go there and report the information on where the deer's at, your contact information, so we can get in touch with you, what symptoms were observed, and also allows you to upload an image or a video of the deer. Most of the sick deer reports we get are things that it's obvious to me or other people that looking at what's probably wrong with it, but we still follow up with it. And again, if it's a deer that's dead, we're going to definitely get a sample, even though it might be an obvious cause of death. We're still trying to get a sample from it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Captain East. He's going to go over the CWD related laws and regs, and hopefully answer some of your questions about that.
Good evening. As they have introduced, my name is Michael East. I work with the law enforcement section, and I know as Chris has talked about the biological standpoint of the positive we found in Lauderdale County, as a lot of you are aware of, we had some, we were on looking at a time of when this was found, that we have about 30 days left in deer season. So some regulations were implemented for Lauderdale and Colbert County, and tonight I'm going to go over an overview of them quickly, And so you can hit the high spots. We have on the back table back there tonight, we do have a copy of this regulation. We do have a map back there so that you will know where the CWD zone is, where the HRZ, the high risk zone, and we're going to look at that on some slides here as we go through this. So, as he said on February, here in January, we just have passed this regulation, and it was in effect this past weekend. So as you look at that, it says on open permit or privately owned lands in Lauderdale or Colbert counties only through the remainder of this deer season. And that's what we need to remember tonight, that this regulation that is passed will go to the end of this deer season. There'll be other decisions made as we go on into the rest of the year, depending on what next season will be. But tonight, what we're talking about is what will go through the end of this season through February 10th, 2022. There is no seasonal or daily bag limit restrictions, no antlered or antlered buck. There's no restrictions whether it's antlered or unantlered, and there's no antler restriction on the deer that are harvested. The next part of that regulation deals with, and it's going to look almost the same to you, however, that deals with the management areas and the community hunting areas that are within the CMZ or the CWD Management Zone, and that applies to Lauderdale Wildlife Management Area, Freedom Hills Wildlife Management Area, the Riverton Community Hunting Area, and 7 Mile Island WMA and Lauderdale and Colbert counties only through the remainder, again, of the 2021-22 deer season. Stock hunter's choice, either sex, as listed and under the management area regulation, will be allowed daily through February 10th, 2022. There is no season or daily bag limit restrictions, again, antlered or unantlered, and there's no antler restriction on the size of the deer that you can kill. On the Lauderdale, the management area is still covering on the management areas. The Lauderdale Wildlife Management Area, Freedom Hills Wildlife Management Area, Riverton Community Hunting Area, and the 7 Mile Island Wildlife Management Area in Lauderdale and Colbert counties only through the remainder of this deer season. Small game hunting shall be prohibited for the remainder of those seasons on the above listed wildlife management areas and the community hunting areas. The daily wildlife management area and the community hunting area check in and check out will continue to be required. If you've been hunting management areas before, then that is still in play. The check in and check out will continue. And on those management areas, hunters shall submit samples for chronic wasting disease testing from all harvested on the above listed wildlife management areas. Right here, as we started this program tonight, we had a map on there showing the chronic wasting disease management zone. The area that is outlined in red, we would refer to as the high risk zone. Hunters shall submit for sampling all deer that are harvested within those areas. This is the high risk zone that is west of US Highway 43. At any scheduled ADCNR mobile sampling locations, drop-off freezer locations. So as Chris showed before me, some of the drop-off locations, and from time to time we are set up at other locations to take samples from those areas. Start going the right way, we'll get this going. In the buffer zone area, which is outlined on this map in the yellow, some of Lauderdale County goes down into Colbert counties. We're strongly encouraging hunters to submit samples for CWD testing from deer harvested within the area of Lauderdale County east of US Highway 43 and all of Colbert County, which we will refer to as the buffer zone area. On that map, as you see also, any deer and anywhere in the state, we're still under the game check system, so that does still apply for the deer. All deer that are harvested in Lauderdale and Colbert County must continue to be reported properly in the game check system. This is something else that, a lot of you in this part of the state, as well as any other part of the state, should be aware of, as some of our prevention measures that we have had in place for several years from people who are hunting out of state or anywhere else who are bringing deer into the state of Alabama, we kind of followed this same guidelines. So starting with the implementation of this regulation, the HRZ zone, which was referred to as the red area, which is the area west of US Highway 43 in Lauderdale County, shall be transported. No whole cervid or cervid body parts taken from those areas shall be transported outside the area of Lauderdale County. This restriction shall not apply to meat of a cervid species that has been completely deboned, clean skull plates with attached bare antlers if no visible brain or spinal tissue is present, unattached bare antlers or sheds, raw capes if no visible brain or spinal cord tissue is present, upper canine teeth if no root structure or other soft tissue is present, and any finished taxidermy product or tan hides. Also included in this, we refer to the area which is the buffer zone that covers the east side of Highway 43 in Lauderdale County and all of Colbert County. Same thing would apply in taking those any of that outside of that buffer zone area out of the CMZ zone. You could take that back into the high-risk zone, but none of this can come out of the CMZ zone, which covers all of Lauderdale and all of Colbert counties. And it is the same as before. However, this restrictions, none of those materials from the HRZ or the buffer zone can leave the whole CMZ area, which would be Lauderdale and Colbert counties. And with that being said, Keith is going to kind of go over these questions here, following up on what the regulations that I just brought to you.
Thanks, Michael. We realize that's a lot of information, and I would encourage you to we have some handouts in that back table that provide all of this in a handout form. We also will have those forms in PDF form on our website. So we'll repeat that website several times to the presentation. So if you write one thing down, just write that website link down, and that has all of this information. So what is the goal of this new regulation? That's a lot of items to restrict you guys or liberate you in killing a lot more deer than you typically would have. We're trying to get samples. We're trying to get access to more hunter-harvested deer to increase our sample size so we can better determine where this disease occurs, if it does occur farther out than what it is right now. And also is to minimize the introduction to new areas through that carcass movement. So we don't want to, if these animals do have chronic wasting disease, we don't want them to be moved out from that HRZ, moving that spinal material, the brain matter material that holds those chronic wasting disease prions. We don't want that material to be moved out of that zone. That is the primary reason for that. And what we expect to learn out of this, we try to get more samples that'll give us a better idea on the extent and the distribution of this disease throughout Colbert and Lauderdale County as well. And we'll use this information to help guide our management decisions as it has for this new regulation and what we've done so far, also for future years as well. And also to provide you all information as well to help you know where you're hunting, if you're hunting in an area that chronic wasting disease may be present. So you want to get your deer tested before you consume it. But also on the website we have really good information about carcass disposal BMPs. If you kill a deer within the HRZ, we prefer those parts remain in the HRZ so we don't spread that material throughout. And we prefer that you bury it so scavengers won't dig that up and transfer that material somewhere else. Deer processors and taxidermists, they can apply for a carcass disposal transport permit if they're having a lot of material that they have to transport somewhere, which has to go outside those designated zones. They have to have a permit to do so. And again, that website has all that information on it as well. And those best management practices, there's a lot more information than what's on here that you can find on the website. So once again, I would encourage you to go to this website. A lot of CWD updates. If we get another positive, if we have any kind of revision of what the regulations we have, information concerning BMPs or other restrictions or other liberations that we have in our regulations, that would all be on this website. So I'd encourage you to write this down. Get on the email list. If we have updates, you'll be sent an update. So it's really a beneficial, educational outlet we provide to you guys. All right, so now we move into the facilitated question and answer session. Amy's going to take over with this, and I believe our panel members will be coming up to the stage.
All right, thanks everyone. Moving into, I think, the anticipated section, I'm just going to remind everybody, if you still have questions, remember, raise your hand and one of our staff will get over, write it on an index card and get it over to our staff over here that are cataloging it. So we brought a diverse panel of expertise up from several portions of the state. I'm just going to go through who we have over here. These questions that we get are going to be directed towards them. Starting off first, you already heard from Chris Cook. Here's our Deer Program Coordinator. He has been with the division since 1993. He currently serves as the Division Deer Program Coordinator, and he brings us a vast knowledge of the applied field experience in deer management, habitat, and deer diseases. Next to him, we have Captain Michael East. He's our Captive Wildlife Coordinator with the Division of Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries. Captain East has worked with the division's law enforcement section for over 20 years. He began his career in '99 in Franklin County. In 2017, he was promoted and assigned to the Montgomery office, where he serves as our division's Captive Wildlife Coordinator and Law Enforcement Section CWD Liaison. Next to him, we have Dr. Wes Stubblefield. He's the District Medical Officer for Alabama Department of Public Health. He serves as the District Medical Officer covering the Northwest Alabama area. He completed his medical school at UAB. He's a former private practice pediatrician for over 14 years prior to joining the Department of Public Health. He provides us expertise on the latest information on diseases and associated human health risks. Next to Dr. Stubblefield, we have Dr. Chris Bishop, who is a veterinary medical officer with the Alabama Department of Agriculture, where he has served in his position for over 30 years. Dr. Bishop is from Lauderdale County. He has training in infectious disease diagnosis, pathology, and epidemiology, and he brings us expertise about the biology and dynamics of infectious diseases. And then we have some, on the very end there, we have Dr. Stephen Ditchkoff. We'll skip over those two and get back to you. Dr. Ditchkoff has worked as a wildlife professor at Auburn University since 2002. He's conducted research on biology and management of white-tailed deer for over 25 years now. He brings us the latest and greatest research related to deer biology and management. And then moving back 2 chairs, we have William McKinley, who is the Deer Program for Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Freshwater Fishes and Parks. He oversees the Deer Management Program, including CWD efforts in Mississippi. He's here to answer any of your questions you may have about CWD and/or hunting in Mississippi. And his counterpart, James Whitaker, he's the wildlife manager in the CWD work unit at Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. He oversees the CWD lab facility, the logistics and staff for CWD programming in Tennessee, and he is here to answer any of your questions you may have related to CWD or hunting in Tennessee, since they are on our borders. So with that, I guess we'll get started. We're going to start off with the first question to Chris Cook. Do you know where this deer came from?
Not at this time. I mean, all we can tell you right now is that we found a positive free-range 3-year-old buck. That's really all we could tell from what we have right now, from the information. We got the location from the hunter, know that it was positive, and that's about it right now.
Captain East, this one's for you. Why haven't we suspended the baiting rule?
As we have talked through our presentation tonight, the goal of where we're at in this right now is it was decided from our department through things that you would see. I know a lot of you know that the baiting law that was passed, where a person could buy a baiting privilege license, does have in the law where the Commissioner of Department of Conservation may suspend baiting without refund. The goal of where we're at right now is we're wanting hunters to be able to harvest the deer that we have to sample. So It was decided that at this time, they didn't want any barriers on that effort in order for people to be able to harvest those deer so that we could get a good sample amount from the areas of Lauderdale and Colbert County. And understand on that, I would like to add to that, that again, as I said in my regulation presentation, that the regulation that we're operating under right now only applies to the end of this deer season. So,
Thank you, Captain East. Okay, this one is for Dr. Steve Ditchkoff. Are there any data showing long-term impacts of CWD in deer populations?
Understand chronic wasting disease has been present in Colorado, Wyoming for, at this point, probably close to 60 years. Wisconsin, closer to 20 years. In those states, there's longer studies that they've been able to detect some declines in both the quality and the quantity of deer that are present in those areas. As Chris Cook mentioned in his presentation earlier, this is always a fatal disease. As a result, it's going to increase natural mortality rates in deer, and so you are going to see a decline in the numbers and quality over time. We're crossing our fingers here that this is an isolated incident. They're going to get a better idea over the next 30 days with their sampling how prevalent the disease is here, and we shouldn't see any declines in the short term in the quality of the herd or the numbers out there, but the potential exists for declines in numbers and quality over time.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, what if I want to have my deer tested but don't want to go through ADCNR?
As I understood the rules from Captain East, if you're in the red zone, that wouldn't really be possible. You need to do it through DCNR. But if you're outside of that area and you wanted to, there are 4 laboratories in the state of Alabama, one at Auburn at the College of Veterinary Medicine, and the closest one to this area would be on the campus of Wallace State in Huntsville. You could take the deer there and they could be tested there.
Thank you. And just to follow up on Dr. Bishop, if you do take your deer to one of the labs yourself, those results still will go through our agency and it will be at your cost. However, if you go through our ADCNR agency, one of our drop-off stations or one of our check stations, we incur that testing cost, so it becomes free to you when you go to our agency. Okay, Dr. Stubblefield. Can humans get CWD from eating or handling CWD deer?
So, as Chris mentioned, there's not been a documented case of CWD in humans, but it's actually unknown. There is likely a very strong species differentiation. In laboratory settings, the data are inconclusive about whether or not this can affect either non-human primates or genetically modified mice. So, out of an abundance of caution, it's recommended that if the deer tests positive, that you not consume the meat, and that each person make the decision about their individual risk tolerance when consuming deer meat from the zone.
Thank you very much. William, since the finding of CWD in North Mississippi a couple years ago, how much has the disease spread in that area?
Mississippi has found CWD in 9 counties. We found our 9th county just a week and a half ago, 2 counties along the Mississippi River, and 7 counties in North Mississippi. The disease had been there for a bit when we found it, and how much has it spread? Well, we're actively surveilling through hunter harvested samples, and we're finding that the prevalence is fairly high in North Benton County and Marshall County. Many of our other counties have been 1 or 2 positives, and so the disease is spreading, but it is spreading slowly, indicative of CWD.
Thank you, William. Chris Cook, are the regulations implemented necessary for only 1 positive tested deer out of 2,000 previously tested?
Yes, we're trying to get samples from where we know CWD has been found. So this regulation provides opportunity to hunters who are willing to kill deer and provide those samples to us in the area where we really need the samples, here in Lauderdale and Colbert County. So it's the much more, it's the more desirable way for us to get samples, was allow the hunters to utilize the deer they are killing, and take advantage of, again, these last 30 days of this hunting season. and go from there based on what we find from what we collect.
Thank you. Dr. Dickoff, if we meet the harvest mark, how much damage will be done to the herds? And then how will we build the herds back up?
Sorry, I couldn't hear some of what you said.
If we meet our harvest mark, how much damage can be done to the herds, seeming population?
I think there's probably little, if any, damage done to the herd. The current approach that's being taken right now is a surveillance approach. There's probably going to be increased harvest through that surveillance, but I would guess that there's going to be little, if any, impact. Any impacts that may occur locally due to heavier harvest on some properties, that sort of thing, can recover very quickly in a year or two.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, when was the deer test dates? When was the deer test dates? Do you have that offhand?
When was it tested?
Yeah.
I'm not sure when the sample got to the lab on December the 23rd. The samples are tested as a batch gets there during hunting season. That's almost every day. And you used a term up there that not everybody's familiar with. You said non-negative. When folks like me take those samples and don't do a very good job, we sometimes get salivary gland instead of lymph node. That messes up the test, and we're not going to say that the sample is negative unless we're sure that it's negative. Any samples that we can't say are negative, we forward to NVSL in Ames, Iowa, and they test that, and it takes about a week or 10 days to get those results back. And as you said a while ago, the results are not going to come back directly to the hunter or to the person who submitted them. They're going to be coming back to the Department of Conservation, and then I'm assuming that you guys, they would notify the hunter of their being negative.
Yes. So, to follow up, the sample was tested on December 23rd. It was detected as a non-negative at the Auburn lab, who immediately overnighted it to NVSL. They received that on the 24th. ADCNR was notified that it was basically a suspect positive, and we received the results that it was confirmed positive from NVSL on January 8th, and we did the public release. At January 8th at 2:30, we did the public release the next day. Was that the correct date, 8th?
Is the
Thursday?
6th.
Sorry, thank you. The 6th. Every day is blending in right now.
We got lab results on the 6th and press release from now on the 7th. So.
Thank you, Chris. Captain East, what good is in cutting out the small game season? What good is it in cutting out the small game season?
The small game season that were cut out or are suspended were on the management areas. If any of you are familiar with hunting management areas, typically during a hunting season when you have a gun deer hunt or any deer hunt going on those properties, small game hunting is not allowed. So with the increased number of hunting opportunities for people to be on those properties, deer hunting, those days were suspended until the end of this hunting season. So it'll be the end of deer season. So understand, for areas on those management areas that have a season, the small game season goes past deer season. Only thing that applies right now is during this deer season. So that was changed in order to have, so we did not have a safety issue or hunter conflicts on there with the increased numbers of deer hunting days on those management areas that typically doesn't happen that time of year.
Thank you. James Whitaker. Why didn't Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agent change any rules for Hardin and Wayne counties?
So the positive here in Alabama, it was within 10 miles of Wayne County. That does trigger making Wayne County a high-risk county. And when a county goes high risk, that automatically kicks in carcass transportation regulations. And it also, feeding and mineral licks restrictions go into effect. So that has gone into effect as of today.
Thank you. Dr. Stubblefield, is it safe to eat deer harvested from this area within the past couple of weeks before this discovery of CWD if the deer wasn't tested?
You know, and I go back to that, it really depends on your individual risk tolerance. If you make that decision for yourself that you're, willing to accept that risk, although likely small, that, and again, that there's not been a human case detected in the time that this disease has been known to happen, you just decide for yourself whether or not that's a risk you're willing to assume, and, either not consume that meat or not consume that meat.
All right, this was a multi-part one. You ready? Okay, do you know for sure if it can't be transmitted to humans? Do you know if CWD for sure can't be transmitted to humans?
No, we don't know. Anyone else on the panel can tell me that if they know differently, but there have been some studies done in genetically modified mice with human protein that have been shown to have been transmitted from ingesting ingested samples with the prion present. There were some studies done in macaque monkeys that were, one study showed that it was possible and another study said it wasn't possible. So we really don't know.
All right. Chris Cook, sorry. Is this initiative intended to be a calling exercise, or is it intended to be a statistical or data collection exercise?
Yeah, we've covered that, and with the extent or the liberalization of the remainder of this deer season, our intent is to collect data and use that data to as a big part of our basis for recommendations moving forward. So right now, it's clearly trying to collect data, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, will this disease infect other livestock, such as goats?
We don't know for sure. Scrapie is a similar disease. It's a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy that's been around since Bible times. And scrapie has not changed from one species to another. It's just sheep and goats only. And there are tests run where you can take the CWD material, you can take some dried brain and artificially inject that into the brain of other animals, and it can be transmitted. But through oral ingestion, we have no results where it can be spread.
Thank you. Captain East, how should I legally bring harvested deer to Alabama from other states, into Alabama from other states?
All deer that come into Alabama from any other state should be completely deboned meat, as we had covered earlier. Same thing that's happening through the HRZ or the CMZ in any part of Alabama. It has to be completely deboned meat, no brain tissue. If you bring in if you're bringing a deer into mount, that deer needs to have a clean skull cap. Any of your hides can be brought in, but there's no brain tissue present. So the easiest way to do that is no spinal cord tissue, deboned meat with no bones left in the meat.
Thank you. Chris Cook, how can I prevent my deer herd from getting CWD?
That's a good question. If you're in an area where it's known to occur, I don't know that you could not say it's inevitable that it'll eventually get there, because it moves on the deer are moving it, and deer move across the landscape, and so there's no surefire way in my mind. Somebody else may want to address it, but if CWD is known to be in the area, there's always that potential because deer move. And if they have CWD, they're carrying it with them and shedding it across the landscape. Deer are social animals, they interact with each other, so there's always that potential to transmit it to a deer in an area where it hasn't been found before. So there's no surefire way to keep it from happening.
Thank you. And I'll reiterate, one of our goals in our management plan is to provide information about the disease to the public. And so we not only have these drop-off sampling stations just within our HRZ and our BRZ, we also have them located throughout the state. And the handout that is here is only specific to Lauderdale and Colbert counties, but there is a website on the bottom. And if you go to that website, you can look up any county where we have a drop-off sampling freezer or a WMA check station or a district office that if you're concerned about your deer and would like it tested, you can bring it there for sampling. So make sure you check out the website for beyond just Lauderdale and Colbert County. Okay, Captain East, are mineral licks in corn still legal?
We've covered on the first question tonight that you are still allowed to use bait, hunt over that bait if you're one who have purchased a baiting privilege license, then you can use that to hunt over. Supplemental feeding has not been banned at this time, so yes, you can do that.
Dr. Ditchkoff, how long will this impact the environment, and can we have some help raising more deer?
What was the end of that question?
How long will this impact the environment, and can we have some help raising more deer?
CWD prions can be present in the environment longer than we're going to be alive. The potential for that exists. And that's why everything that the states can end up doing is going to be to try to reduce spread and shedding of prions if possible. Anything that happens with regards to the herd, that there's a decline in numbers, I don't think there's going to be any need for assistance in trying to get a herd to recover. While I'm not aware of or involved in any regulations that are passed by the state, I'm not aware. I would be surprised to see anything that we're trying to eradicate populations. And any efforts that, if they could come where there's attempts to reduce a population, there's going to be plenty of deer to recoup those populations fairly quickly, I would imagine.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, is there any way to put medicine in a block or pellet form to treat CWD?
No.
Very simple. Good answer.
I would love to expand on it, but this prion is not alive, so you really can't kill it. That's the problem that eventually we'll have if they continue to grow, is what we'll do with the positive deer. At one of our laboratories, we have a tissue digester. Mm-hmm. It's like a big pressure cooker, and it's big enough for several of us to get in it. And then we fill it with what my grandmother called red devil lye. And then we pressure cook that carcass in lye. And we think that we've denatured the protein in it so that it's no longer infectious. But other than that, there's no way to remove it from the environment.
Thank you. All right, Chris Cook, this is a long one. You might need a pen. Ready? As you mentioned, CWD is long-term, yet most deer are killed around 3 to 4 years. You guys manage conservation, but yet are releasing hunters to kill as many deer as they want. A case not multiple, sorry, reading from here, not spreading like wildfire, it seems as we are depleting the deer population quicker than CWD is. So how is this act justified when it isn't spreading rapidly and most deer are killed before CWD affects and or kills them?
I mentioned that a deer can have CWD and be spreading it and infecting other deer that don't have it for several years before they die from CWD. So to say that it's not killing them immediately, the issue is them spreading it. We mentioned it, the question about how can I keep it from getting on my property. Deer that have CWD is carrying those prions around. They interact with other deer, potentially give it to deer in new areas, and again, that disease progresses, causing neurological problems. And so deer, you would think, and probably logically, they would move and wander way more than they would if they weren't having neurological problems. So to say that we should just do nothing because they're going to live 3 or 4 years is short-sighted. As you start getting more deer in the population that has CWD, it will start, more and more deer will start getting it at a faster rate because there's more deer to give it to other deer. So long term, if that's the approach we take, that would be the justification. Again, this regulation that's in place right now is not to reduce the deer population or to eradicate, as we've heard. Hunters aren't going to do that in 30 days. They're just not that good. We're trying to get samples. How many of y'all have cameras on bait piles and have pictures of deer you've never seen during daylight? How are you going to kill those deer? I mean, just keep that in mind. And this is a short-term exercise to get samples. So keep that in mind. And we're going to take this data along with other information and make recommendations moving forward to hopefully do our best to try to slow the spread and keep it from reaching other areas of Alabama and impacting other hunters in other parts of the state.
Sure can.
I think something to keep in mind is to take a look at what's happened in some other states. And Wisconsin and Illinois provide a great example. They detected CWD, I think it was in 2001, so 21 years ago. And number one, these are still desirable places to go deer hunt. I'm assuming that there's people out here that would be very interested in going to Illinois and Wisconsin to deer hunt today. The deer, it's high quality herds, good number of deer, number one. But number two, they've also been very different with regards to how they've managed the deer in those states. Wisconsin did not take much of an active approach. Illinois took a very active approach. Wisconsin has very high prevalence rates of many of their counties today. Illinois has very low prevalence rates in many of their counties. You know, depending upon the approach that's taken, you can have very different results in the long term, but still maintain a high quality deer population. And so I don't think you should look at this as, you know, that this is the end of the world with regards to deer hunting or deer herd or anything like that. But I think you have to take a look at this as we need to understand what the situation is right here to best manage the deer herd going forward and have a little bit of faith in the state agency, that sort of thing, that have learned from the mistakes and the successes of other states with this. And I'm sure they'll do a great job with it.
Thank you, Steve. And just to follow up for a little bit of preference, I know we've gotten this question a lot, and Marianne, our outreach and education specialist, likes to sum this up very quickly. Our seasons currently, our bag limits are set up so each individual can currently take 137 deer in a season, okay? So the numbers that we're looking at in comparison that we're taking for these samples, it is a little bit of a bump, but it's helped us to understand. But I don't think anybody out there has taken 137 deer currently. We can take a doe a day. We have a 3-bag buck, and if you're on a WMA, you can get 2 bonus buck. So our deer system and our herd is set, our management is set up to be able to have these increased sampling structure. Okay. Michael East, ready? Okay. Are firearms allowed on 7 Mile Island under the new regulation?
Management areas have different rules and regulations than other places. We did not change the legal arms and ammunition that applies to those management areas. It only changed the seasons and when you could hunt in there. So as it has been, 7 Mile Island has been a bow hunting area, and that has not changed.
Thank you. William McKinley. Do the Mississippi counties that border Lauderdale have CWD?
The only Mississippi county that borders Lauderdale is Tishomingo. We have not detected CWD in Tishomingo, but we did detect it within a little over 1 mile of the Tishomingo border. That positive was right at 15 miles from the Alabama line.
Thank you. This is for Michael East and Chris Cook. Do you know where the carcass from the CWD deer is?
We know where the meat for the CWD is because we made contact with the hunter and notified him of the positive, and he still had the meat, and he was making a decision of what he was going to do with it.
Thank you.
That's all the information we have.
Okay. Dr. Stubblefield, does CWD affect the meat?
So the possibility is there. The proteins are most present in the neurologic and lymph tissue, but that's why, again, out of that abundance of caution, that we recommend, if the deer tests positive, that the meat not be consumed.
Thank you. James, do the Tennessee counties that border Lauderdale County have CWD?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Steve, if a doe has CWD and births the fawn, will the fawn have CWD?
I'm not aware of any information that shows that a fawn that's going to be born is going to necessarily have CWD. As was mentioned before, CWD is rarely found in fawns. However, I do know that prions can be passed in milk, so the potential exists for it to be passed from mother to fawn. However, once again, there's been very low prevalence rates detected in tested fawns.
Okay, thank you. Chris Cook, how many positive cases have been found in Alabama? In which counties?
I hope everybody knows the answer to that. We've found one in a wild deer in Lauderdale County. So that's all we have at this time, fortunately. And hopefully that'll be all we'll have this time next year. But we're gonna keep looking for it and do our due diligence in trying to determine the distribution and prevalence of the disease in Lauderdale County.
Thank you. This is for Chris, but we've kind of already answered this by Michael East. Are the results of the test given to the submitter? Yes, they are. They're also available if you get a sample on our website, on that same website, CWD, or Outdoor Alabama /CWD-info, sampling results. Everybody gets a sampling tag and a number. You use that number to search on that website. You put it in the upper box, you put your sampling number in there, and your results are on there. So everybody does get their results. Dr. Bishop, how far out is the RT Quick test from being available for the endorser? For the end user, I'm sorry.
It's being used at the current time, as I understand, the rectal mucosal test is being used currently in Texas and some other areas. That's just going to be up to the ADCNR in Alabama as to when they would allow it. It has some problems with some false negatives and some false positives. So there's still a little bit of work to be done on the test.
Okay, thank you. Captain East, I have to travel out of the buffer zone for where I hunt. Is this permissionable?
You're traveling, say that again?
I have to travel out of the buffer zone for where I hunt. Is this permissible?
If you travel out of buffer zone, if you've harvested deer, you know that it doesn't matter where you're hunting at. If you're hunting within the HRZ or in the buffer zone, anything that you harvest within those areas must stay within the CMZ. If you're in that HRZ where you're hunting, then the deboned meat is the only thing that can come out. You have to leave that carcass in there. So the question to your buffer zone, if you're traveling out of that buffer zone and you have to go to some other part of the state that you live in, then you can only take out of that area the deboned meat. You cannot take any whole carcass out of there to any other area in the state.
And I don't know, they may have been wondering if, like, if you're hunting in Lawrence County or Limestone County, can you bring a whole carcass back into the buffer zone, which that's fine. You can bring stuff into the buffer zone and the high-risk zone, you just can't move it the other way.
Once it's in, it's in. You can't bring it back out. Okay, Dr. Stubblefield. We've had a lot of these questions. This will probably be the last one I ask because we've repeated it several times. Can I eat the meat from a deer killed in Franklin County back in November?
So, since that wouldn't be part of this high-risk zone, you know, this chance is not zero that there are not other deer that are infected with this disease. But obviously the chance would be higher in the zone where the deer was found. So again, it comes down to that individual risk tolerance that you decide for yourself, knowing that that it's possible, but the chances are very small.
Thank you. Dr. Ditchkoff. Wisconsin just reported that after 8 years of moderate population reduction, CWD is substantially larger than was known in the zone and is likely increasing. What makes you think deer population reduction efforts in Alabama will be any more successful?
First of all, I got a strong suspicion, I think most people do, that CWD was present in Wisconsin far longer than before they originally detected it. Their original detection, they found one animal. As soon as they did a lot of surveillance, they found a lot more animals, far more widespread than they had originally thought. Number two, Wisconsin made some significant efforts towards managing their deer herd in a way that they thought was going to benefit their deer herd, and then took the advice, made a poor decision of taking the advice from an individual that they hired who did not have their best interest in mind. As a result, they took their foot off the gas from a management perspective and saw a lot of negative implications. Illinois, on the other hand, maintained and stuck with their deer management plan and have seen a lot of success with regards to what they did. So I think Alabama is a bit different than what you see up in Wisconsin. Number one is it is possible, we are hoping, that this is the sole case of chronic wasting disease in Alabama. That's the purpose of the sampling during the next 30 days. Find out how widespread it is. Hopefully we've detected it early. Maybe we can be like New York, have one animal, 2 animals detected and never detected again. That's what everybody's going to hope for. But hopefully we've detected it early. If we've detected it early enough, then in theory, effective management actions should be, or management actions should be effective at maintaining at the worst case scenario, a low prevalence rate here in Lauderdale County, and hopefully reducing any rate of spread into surrounding counties.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, I have a collection of questions that are all very similar, so we'll rapid fire. Basically, how long can prions survive in the environment without a host? And can we test the soil and plants in this zone?
As was stated earlier, the prions will be in the environment for a long, long time. I don't know how long, but a long time, longer than we'll be alive. At our laboratories, we cannot test the soil or the plants. It can be done, but we don't have that capability in Alabama to do that.
Thank you. Okay. Captain East, why not reverse the baiting law?
As we have talked before, in questions answered at this time, we need to understand that we're early in this, we're only a week into this. We have 30 days left in the hunting season, and again, this period is right now to the end of February. After February, that is a decision that can be made at a later date. Our commissioner has the authority that the law says he may do that. So at this time, in order to increase the testing ability, we didn't want to put any barriers within hunters, and also people had already purchased their license this year, and we're 30 days left in hunting season.
Thank you. Follow up to that. So why the Colbert rule change since the river separates it?
as you would look in there, the management zones areas, our CWD management zones covers a 25-mile radius. It changes in those counties as we have been in a lot of you have seen over time, even before this, the reason the sampling were higher in these counties in this area because we were in that zone from Mississippi. So you try to stay ahead of the disease where that you can detect it before there's a lot of spread. So that's the reason for having Colbert County included in that.
Thank you. Dr. Ditchkoff, can you talk to us about male-female preference for CWD susceptibility?
I'm not sure that there's necessarily difference in susceptibility between males and females, but there tend to be greater prevalence rates in males. The reason being is that males they travel further distance, come into greater contact with more individuals during the breeding season. This is a density-dependent disease. Animal-to-animal contact is kind of the direct form of spread. Because males are wandering further, they've got greater probability of coming into contact with positive animals. As a result, they're naturally going to have a greater prevalence rate.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop, this might be a joint question between you and us. How long does it take to get the test results from the freezer drop-off location?
That depends on how I don't know how often you guys are going to go by and empty the freezers and get them transported to the laboratory. But once they're at the laboratory, you should get results back within 10 days to 2 weeks.
Thank you. Yeah, we have staff that has to go out, and at the drop-off freezer locations, those deer heads are frozen. They do take a day or two to actually thaw out for us to actually get in there and get the samples. So there is a 2-day delay. Once you drop it off, then our folk getting to the head, letting it thaw, pulling the sample, and then driving it to the lab. So there's a little delay from our end, then it gets tested. Okay, it's a money question. Wasn't money allotted for funding a week before the positive was found? No. Sure wish there was, but unfortunately there was not. Okay, Dr. Ditchkoff, over the past 10 to 5 years, how have the countermeasures used to battle CWD changed?
I don't know if the measures have necessarily changed. I think they've probably been refined. I think probably the biggest change that we've had in the last 25 years is the ability for surveillance. Rapid turnaround time with testing. If you take a look at 25 years ago, they were testing and hanging carcasses in freezers and waiting months to get results back. We're able to get those results quickly. That enables better decision making by state agencies. And I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. Number two is carcass disposal. Transportation of carcasses has probably been a big, had a real positive impact on reducing spread. But we're trying to learn from, what's happening in Colorado, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Illinois. What's working for them, what's been effective, and we are still learning. We're definitely not. It'd be nice if we were totally, omniscient with this, but we're not.
Thank you very much. Captain East, how sure are you the deer was killed in Lauderdale County and not brought in illegally from Tennessee or Mississippi and claimed to be in Lauderdale County?
People, you can get conspiracy theories from everywhere, and if you've ever worked in any law enforcement agency or any state agency, we are confident, pretty confident in interviews and talking with the hunter that we've had guys go out and interview with this hunter. We've done our best investigation, and we're pretty confident that this deer is from Alabama, and it was harvested in Alabama. In this situation, we have no reason to suspect that this deer was imported into the state at this time.
Thank you. We have a request to be noted down. Chris Cook, can we get a drop-off freezer at the North Alabama Deer Shack? Can you give people a little insight on how we are able to put out the drop-off freezers at locations?
Yeah, the issue we run into a lot of places is we have to have a covered space with electricity to put a freezer. But if that location fits that criteria, and it also needs to be preferably accessible 24 hours a day by hunters that are coming through to drop one off. But if you have, if that suits that or fits that description, or if you know of any other areas that businesses that fit that description, the best thing probably is to contact the district office in Tanner, the District 1 office. Talk to Judd Easterwood, he's the wildlife supervisor, and get that information to him. And we have spare freezers waiting to be deployed as we get locations. So I don't have the number for District 1 office off the top of my head. You can find it on our website, but here, let me see your regulation book. If you want to write it down, I'll give it to you real quick. But again, talk to Judd Easterwood, and he'll get with his folks about getting that freezer put out. But we definitely want to hear about these places like that, that where we can put them out, because we want to make it convenient for people to get their deer tested. Well, it's 256-353-2634. 256-353-2634. And asked to speak to Judd Easterwood. He's the wildlife supervisor for this district.
Thank you. And just a note, not just with D1, you can contact any of your district supervisors or your local technical assistance biologist in your area. If you do know or have a location personally that suits our needs for putting out a drop-off freezer, we are always looking for locations to make it more convenient to the hunting public. I do want to do a last call right now. We have quite a few questions still on the table. We're going to condense some of those. So it's a last call for questions in the next 2 minutes. We'll continue on what we have. I do want to give a reminder. I'll point her out right now. This is Miss Marianne Hudson over here. She's our outreach and education coordinator. You can find her number on the website. She can field any of your questions. You can call the Montgomery office any day during the week, and she can help answer any of those questions or point you to the appropriate person if we did not get to your question bank this evening. Okay. Dr. Stubblefield. How can a disease that is fatal in deer be harmless to humans?
So going back to what we were talking about before, there's never been a documented case in humans. And there is no evidence at this point that confirms that it can be spread to humans through ingestion of deer meat, although the possibility is there. So we know that there are human forms of this disease, as Chris mentioned earlier. There are other forms in other animal species of this protein that causes these malformations. And so, again, just out of that abundance of caution, we want everyone to be careful. And the CDC does recommend that that you just use that risk tolerance and not consume the meat if it's positive.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Bishop, a follow-up on this. Can any animal transporting or carrying the prion into an area, can any animal transport or carry the prion into the area, such as a raccoon, and I cannot read what that other one is.
Well, I'll let the wildlife biologist answer these questions as best that they can, but if the material is on a plant or in the plant and an animal eats the plant, we know for sure that CWD is spread, is viable in the urine and in the feces and the saliva. So it only makes sense that it could be spread by ingestion from other animals. But I would defer that to one of the wildlife biologists.
I guess that's you, Steve. You lean forward first.
The potential exists, yes. If you were to have a coyote haul a leg, something like that, yes, it can be spread from area to area. But in most cases, you're not really going to be transporting those materials further than the range of that deer that was already wandering around naturally. There's the possibility that you could have some things be transported by vultures, something like that. But the quantity that they're transporting and spreading relative to the amount of virus, the amount of prions that are being spread by that deer while they're alive is probably very minimal. So the potential exists, but it's probably fairly remote probability of spreading into new areas in that way.
Thank you. Captain East, will there be any place where a deer can be carted to dispose of it?
Tennessee.
Sold.
It's through the best management practices that we showed you some on the websites or through our website. You know, what the recommendation is what we need to understand. If, if you have CWDs found on your property or whatever, then, it doesn't matter if you move that carcass or not. It can stay there. We prefer it to be buried, so it's just, Dr. Discoff alluded to, we don't want any other animals. So if you're in that area, disposal could be on your property. You know, I know how people dispose of them. A lot of guys have places on their hunting club where they dispose of deer. We would encourage, if you're in that zone, the CMZ or anywhere in the CMZ or the HRZ, and you're having to leave that carcass in there, we do, if you've just been in the habit of just leaving it on throwing it out somewhere, we would encourage you to have somewhere to bury that. However, as we said, we are working with processors in the area and are developing a plan where, will be, and we have going to have a area where those processors can take those out to an approved ADM-lined landfill where those can be properly disposed of. So there is options for people to legally dispose of them, and a lot of them we're working with those who are in the business to do that.
Thank you. And on the back table, if you didn't get it, there's a one-page handout here about CMZ best management practices for harvest disposal. So if you haven't gotten one, please pick one up. This information also located on our website, OutdoorAlabama/CWD-info. I think we addressed this one, but I'll just, we had a question, where will the drop-off freezer or deer heads be located, and will deer heads need to be sealed in bags? So again, here is the flyer and the most up-to-date information on where you can drop off your deer heads for sampling is on our website, as well as the most current on this page for Lauderdale and Colbert counties. When you get to that drop-off location, there will be sampling tags, as well as garbage bags and zip ties, as well as a sticker with instructions on what you're supposed to do on top of that freezer. We try to make it as easy as possible and provide you with all the supplies we can to put the sample in the freezer. Okay, we're trying to get through as many as we can in this last 30 minutes. Let's see, Dr. Stubblefield, what do we do with carcasses while we're waiting on test results? Can we eat them? What?
So if it's possible, it would be recommended that you wait until test results are back before you consume the deer. Obviously, you don't want to take that chance because of the recommendations not to consume the meat. So I don't know exactly what you would, whatever you normally do with them before you would eat them.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder, in Lauderdale County, we had previously not had a freezer located at the check station, but we were able to get power out there today and a setup. So we do have a freezer location at Lauderdale WMA check station so that you can drop your heads off there after hours as well. And that just came online today after we printed this. Captain East. Switching to fowl, Waterfowl hunting on TVA, undeveloped land, as long as it is not within any of the closed management area. So can waterfowl hunting on TVA undeveloped land occur as long as this is not within any of the closed management areas?
As long as it is not within any of the areas of a closed management area, there's been no change to the waterfowl hunting season, as long as it does not incorporate any of the management area zones within that area.
Thank you. Chris Cook, private landowner who gets a positive on their land, what can they expect the state will do? And what will the state expect of me?
Really, the only thing we're going to do is contact you and get more information about, exactly where the deer was at, information on possibly how it was behaving, if it was behaving abnormally, how the carcass was disposed of, if you still have the meat, things like that. There's really not anything else that we would be doing at this time, other than just gathering information on most information we can about the deer and where it was at when it was killed, and the disposition of the carcass. I don't know what may have been, the other kind of what you was wondering about, but maybe one of them things have to talk to you directly afterwards to see maybe what you had in mind, because that's, I don't know if we really addressed what you were asking.
Thank you. One more for you. Will the state narrow the zones after these initial sampling efforts?
Again, it's going to depend on what we find as far as if we have more positives and where they're at. That's going to dictate how the high-risk zone and overall CWD management zones lines will be delineated moving forward. So it just depends on what we find from what we're going to sample between now and the end of the season.
Thank you. Captain East, we haven't had this one in a while, but we've had it many times before. How can you know if the urine sold at stores is compliant with regulation?
And that's referring to the urine ban that we, another one of those measures that we had in place prior to this to help alleviate artificially bringing CWD into the state. As we described before, that urine has to come from a source that is licensed under USDA, and what we have asked is like the ATA, Archery Trade Association, they put their logos on there. Their products come through a process through that. We also have other companies that they're not a member of ATA, and they have submitted letters to us that they put with those, and we encourage them when they're selling them to put those with those bottles of urine, saying that this has, and show the certification that it has been certified through a USDA chronic waste and disease management program where that urine was collected.
Thank you. Chris Cook. We've had portions of this before, but not the other. I left my deer at a processing business and left the head to be tested. Who will hear the results of the test, the hunter or the processing business? Meaning, will the hunter get the results of the test and need to relay that to the processor so they will know to go ahead and begin processing the deer?
That's going to be the typical route. As Amy said earlier, as results come in from the lab, we post that on our website using the number on the tag that was attached to it when you dropped it off. And then ideally you will let the processor know, hey, my deer came back and it was not detected. At least that's the standard process or protocol that I would tell people. It's up to, if you hear from us, it's not because your deer didn't test positive or your deer was not detected. If you hear from us, there's probably other questions about like, hey, your deer was positive. So we're not going to call everybody and let them know. That's why we're putting it out there as quick as we can so you can check them yourself or have somebody check them. But it's real simple. Just put your number in the search box and it'll pop up and show you if it's there, if it's been, if the results are back. And we're working with the lab to kind of prioritize samples that are submitted from Lauderdale and Colbert County to try to get them to the front, because we're still sampling all over the state, and they've turned around pretty quick. We collected quite a bit of samples this past weekend from up here, and all of those, if you had one tested, are sampled by our staff. This weekend up here is probably already up there. It had a bunch of results come in this afternoon. I saw on my phone. I haven't had a chance to update it. I'll update it in the morning. But if you had one tested this past weekend or sampled this past weekend, the results are probably already in, and you can check now. If they're not there now, check tomorrow at lunch, and they'll probably be there. They've worked real well with us about getting a quick turnaround on testing these deer from an area where we really want to know what's going on as quick as we can.
Thank you. Captain East, I'm now finding bucks with antlers cut off in the woods. People are not bringing what they shoot out of the woods. How can you address this? How do we address this?
No, we would, that's not what we're encouraging people to do. The reason that we have this during the hunting season is, what we have to understand in this situation is just because you take away the season bag limit or the daily bag limit, there's always going to be bad apples in everything you do. Before we did this, people was doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. They break the laws. We know that. If it wouldn't, I wouldn't have a job for the last 20 years. But what we're saying is we put it in this time frame because we want the hunters, okay, to be able to harvest these animals in this hunting season. We can take the samples and be able to use the meat. That's the reason processors can still take this meat. They can still take it, and if it's tested, it doesn't test, the results come back, doesn't test positive for CWD, then that meat can be used. So in that situation, we don't encourage anybody. If you're not going to do nothing with it, then that's probably, don't need to kill it. That's the bottom line. But if you're going to use it, then that's what you need to be doing with it. So, we're giving people the opportunity to take more animals. We hadn't changed our philosophy of people going out to hunt in order to use the wildlife that they kill in a reasonable manner of using it, of eating it. So,
thank you. Okay, we're trying to whittle down what questions we have not gotten before, so we have time for maybe about 5 more. I do want to reiterate, if your question was not paraphrased, you didn't get your answer, or you want a specific question that you didn't hear today, please reach out to our Montgomery office via email, Marianne Hudson. We are there to answer your questions. We will have somebody contact you back. So don't be alarmed if we didn't get your question. We have resources available to you to respond to those throughout normal business hours during the week, although Marianne likes to answer emails at 2 in the morning, so you may also get one at 2 in the morning. Okay, this one can be either Steve or Chris, and you both might have insight. Where do you see our hunting future to be in the next 5 years?
I think Steve mentioned it. I hope everybody realizes that just because we found CWD is not the end of deer hunting. Our agency will have to adapt to how we manage deer likely, especially if the prevalence rate is not minimal. And as hunters, we're already asking you to adapt to the things that we're probably going to have to do moving forward, as far as the breaking down the carcass before you move it out of certain zones, and disposing of your carcass or the remains as we ask, and having some mandatory testing dates things like that. So it's not the end of deer hunting, you know, in areas where, and William and James can address this, so specifically maybe with what they're seeing with landowners and hunting clubs in the parts of Mississippi and Tennessee where they have CWD is, you know, as the prevalence rate increases to certain levels, then you would expect life expectancy to shorten on animals. So managing for 5 and 6 year old bucks will become more difficult because of those natural mortality factors will increase as CWD progresses and becomes more prevalent. Overall productivity in the population may decline a little bit just because does aren't living as long and aren't producing as many fawns in their lifetime. So it's things like that we'll all be learning to adapt to and go moving forward. But it's not the end of deer hunting and deer management. It's just it going to require some tweaking of what we do and what you as a landowner and hunter does.
I don't think it's going to be much different in 5 years.
Yeah, not in 5 years. Yeah, for sure. Not here. Again, you can talk to people that's been in the core zone of Wisconsin for 20 years, and I would think they would say, you know, theirs has definitely changed. Hopefully we won't be near the situation that they're in with the prevalence rates as high as they are seeing in parts of those counties with 50+% of the 2-year-old and older bucks having it. You know, that's a terrible situation, and glad we're not dealing with it. I don't know if William and James have anything to add. You know, again, they've only found it 3 or 4 years ago, so it's a long drawn out bad situation to deal with from agency and a hunter standpoint. So it's in a matter of 3 or 4 years, they probably haven't seen enough to say how it's changed things other than having to adapt with how they're setting seasons and whatnot.
I would agree. In Mississippi, we hadn't had it long enough we had it years before, obviously, because it's a fairly high prevalence rate in Benton and Marshall counties, but we haven't seen much change in hunting. I will point out that Alabama needs your help to find out if they've caught this early. It appears that they have. And catching it early is a very, very much desired time to find CWD. You don't ever want to find it. But when you do, you want to find it as soon as it gets there because you have so many more options of being able to manage. Would you rather hunt in an area that had a 1% prevalence, 1 out of 100 deer? Or would you rather be looking at 1 out of 2 deer, which is what some of the counties in Wisconsin are looking at and other areas of the country? So think about that, 1 in 100 or even less than 1 in 100. That's what we have in most of the counties in Mississippi right now. And we want to try to keep it that way.
Yeah, I would agree. Tennessee, again, we haven't had it, or we hadn't discovered it until 2018-19 season, but there are still, it's, you know, phenomenal hunting opportunities, and we haven't seen a major change as far as hunter success. Like they've mentioned, the key now more than ever is continue to hunt and continue to harvest deer, so Alabama can have a better idea of, you know, the preference of this.
Thank you. We have a couple questions here that actually haven't been asked before, so we're going to ask those and wrap some things up. Dr. Bishop, we've kind of touched on this, but are some deer immune to CWD?
I don't think so. I think just because they don't seem to have it, it's probably due to chance and to their level of exposure rather than being immune.
Okay, thank you. Captain East, how can you have a trophy mounted if the head must be turned in? How can you have a deer trophy mount?
We, as we have mentioned, on some of the areas that we will have up here, you know, just because of personnel issues and stuff like that, I can let Amy and them speak to, when I get through answering your question of areas where that they will have people, but we're hoping to have more opportunities up here for people to have a place they can drop off or have that deer dropped and tested or sample taken from it. Because, I know what you're referring to. If you drop it off in the freezer location, it says cut the head off. And Chris can probably answer more to how some of them are doing it, because, this is not new. It's not new of us taking samples. We have freezers all over the state and have been. So Chris can probably set up, or some of them, the biologist that's been actually taking a sample, can say how people have been adapting to do that.
Ideally, again, with the carcass movement restrictions, it would be just like if you killed a deer that you were going to have mounted out of Tennessee and you brought it back to Alabama. It has to be completely caped out and the skull cap cut off, and then you could drop that skinned head with antlers removed in a freezer. Or if you have a taxidermist within the HRZ, or if you're hunting in the buffer zone and have a taxidermist either there or in the HRZ, you can take it to them and have it prepped for mounting, and then you could drop the head in one of the freezers. But that's the only way right now, unless you're again, we have one of the they're either running the check station at the WMAs, and you're able to go by there while somebody's there, or one of our mobile sampling stations that we're doing between now and the end of the season. We can get a sample off of a head that's been skint for down pretty close to the head, for like you typically do when you're taking it to a taxidermist. So you can still get the sample off without messing anything up. But yeah, don't drop it at a freezer if you want the antlers back, because that's just you're not going to get them back. So that's something we have to work through. But it's again, just like if you were hunting in another state, you're going to have to either find a taxidermist in that zone to mount it, or learn how to cape a head out, unfortunately, and drop the head off at the freezer after the hide and antlers have been removed.
Okay. We're getting close to 8 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up with one more question. This can be for Michael East and/or Chris Cook. Will the hunting season be extended past February 10 to help eliminate this problem?
That's not likely. Again, this isn't. This regulation is not to eliminate CWD or eradicate the deer population. It's to get samples, and we're pretty confident we'll get the samples that we need with the remainder of the season that we have. So it's not, that hasn't been put on the table, and I don't see it being put on the table. But I think with hunters helping us, I think we'll get what we're looking for as far as sample numbers using what we've got in place right now.
Thank you. Any closing comments from the panel?
I would like to mention something that, what we talked about, people are high confident or deer these deer are killed in the state of Alabama. So let me put this out here to realize, prior to setting these CWD zones, hunters, you understand, when you take a sample from a deer, I don't care if you drop it at the taxidermist or if it's in a freezer, those cards are signed by the hunter. We're just not going places and taking samples from, even if you drop it at a processor, even prior to this. It's up to you to fill out the card and sign on it. So, when an individual brings a deer in to have it tested, then understand, when we look at an investigation or looking at where a deer come from, hey, what's the use in bringing one in from somewhere if you don't have to have it sampled, okay? These guys voluntarily had their sample to help us with our effort in the state, and unfortunately, One of them has come back CWD positive from a deer in Alabama. So, you know, that, I just wanted to add that in there to the question we had about our investigation, where that deer came from.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for your time on the panel and coming to help us out. I'd like to thank everybody in the audience. We had a great turnout. We had some really good questions. We will do our best. We have all of them on index cards. There was a twofold reason for that. We will go through these again, any that we didn't answer. We will go through our frequently asked questions about CWD on our website, and if we haven't addressed any of the information, something new that came up in your questions, we will try and update that information on our website in the frequently asked questions. All of our biologists, district supervisors, law enforcement staff have all been briefed and understand CWD and are equipped to answer questions for you. You can reach out to any one of them. You can also reach out to our Montgomery office. We are all there to help provide information for you to continue hunting safely and enjoy it. With that, we thank you again for coming out.